Hi, Desiree. You hearing me okay?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Perfect.
Hey, Ben, I know you guys are going to be presenting. Can you just do a quick test to make sure you're working okay?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep, sounds
Okay.
good. Okay, and you guys are going to want to grab the presentation to be able to present your online stuff, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Desiree, do you need to give him access or will he be able to just go ahead and present?
Yeah, I think we should be good.
Okay. We've got a minute or two, Ben. Do you want to just try screen share, make sure that'll work?
Sure. I'm not seeing
Down on the
share.
bottom there where it says participants chat, there's like a green one with an arrow
Oh,
that says screen
sorry.
share.
There we go. I have to send a request.
I think is good now. I think because I'm sharing, just give me when to stop sharing my screen, Craig, and then I'll resume it back on after the presentation.
I, I'm sorry, what does he need to do?
Just let me know when to stop my presentation, and then he should be able to share his screen.
Okay. What you want to just, we'll be fine. I think, like I said, when we switch to it, I'm going to do a short, just a minute before you guys, I hand it over to you and Deborah.
Okay.
Yeah, when I do that, then Deborah or Desiree, I'll just tell you to go ahead and stop presenting for us, and Ben can go ahead and hopefully grab the screen share.
Okay.
All right, we gotta. Uh, Let me just go to. Chairman Jones, we're still, I think, amassing folks here. I think we've only got 3 board members on so far, so I'm kind of monitoring. I'll let you know when we get to a quorum.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so we right now I'm showing Directors Jones, Directors Averill, Directors Brockie, Director Blinn, and Director Coffin. There's a couple of cell phones on there, so I'm suspecting one of those might be Director Liu and perhaps others. At any rate, with 5 members, we do have a quorum, so I think we're okay to go ahead and begin.
All right, thanks, Craig. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. This is the December 11th, 2025 meeting of the Clean Transit Enterprise Board. We will consider Craig's announcement of folks as the roll call. Hopefully, everyone's had a chance to review the agenda. Are there any questions or desired revisions? I will note Director Brackie has asked for a few moments during director comments to speak to the passing of Faith Winter.
Let's go on to the next slide. Oh, sorry.
All right. Moving on, our first action item this afternoon would be the approval of the minutes from the October 28th board meeting. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to review. Are there any comments or revisions that folks want to raise now? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes from October 28th?
I motion to approve the minutes from the October 28th CTE meeting.
In a second?
This is Director Brackie. I'll second.
Great. All in favor of approval of minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. All right, our next item, public comments. Craig, has anyone from the public signed up to speak today?
To the best of my understanding, no. Desiree, could you confirm? I didn't see you show that anyone had requested. I believe there's none. I didn't hear about any, so I think we can move on.
All right, moving right along. Next, it's back to you, Craig, for the program administrator update.
Sure. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So I guess before I jump into this, I will say that I was invited and had the privilege and honor to present to the joint boards of RTD and the Front Range Passenger Rail about CTE funding and funding, our finances and our funding opportunities. It was an interesting experience. I think I'll kind of decompress with kind of internally and maybe share more next meeting. But you know, my one main takeaway from that is that we do. I think we've got a little bit more work to do in terms of being able to explain how our formula works and doing some more documentation there, and that's in the way, I guess. On the positive side, I've been able to use the word vituperative for the last few days, and that's always fun. Anyhow, let's move on to other stuff. Grant contract status. We continue to work on getting our existing awards under contract. Again, I think we've got all of the first round planning awards and the first round capital awards under contract now. I think the one exception remains our capital grant to transport. But that's really at their request. I think we're still kind of in limbo as to where we're going there. And still trying to get the remaining planning grants through that contracting process. But we are making progress. I'm working on a dashboard to replace our sort of what's kind of up there on the our website now. So I haven't been showing that because I really want to kind of work towards a much more, I think, expansive dashboard on our contracting status and our overall program performance. It's just going to take another month or two before I'm there, but that's why I haven't been showing it. One really exciting thing is within the EV program or the retail delivery program, we have a contract that got completed. So we have one of the vehicles that got purchased. Wait, I'm sorry, I'm spacing on their name. I want to say Langston Senior Services, but we've closed out the contract. They've bought an EV vehicle. So I guess a milestone for CTE is our first electric vehicle purchase that we supported is now up and operating and on the road. So hopefully we'll have a lot more to report in the next couple of months, as I think we're kind of getting to that in the process. I think I've mentioned this. The CTE is overseeing a Regional Transportation Authority best practices study that was required by legislation from last year. That project is well underway. We've selected a whole range of case studies to do both in Colorado and from around the country. And like I said, I'm hoping that we start having some preliminary results from that I can share with the board in January. We do have a hard deadline to report out about that study to the legislature on March 31st. But I'm also optimistic that study is going to provide some ideas and concepts that we could build into standing up the SB 230 discretionary program. So more to come on that. In terms of the formula program, I said we keep moving forward. We've got all of our the awards that we've done. We're now working on getting them into co-trams and get award letters out. I hope to have that happen very soon. And then said we're going to start moving forward with getting all those grants we've awarded under contract, and hopefully to agencies that can spend the money. Also, our consultant has been very active working with the agencies that either submitted a full COA but still needed a little bit of work, or that have requested deferred COAs. And I said there's a lot of activity there. I'm kind of expecting that sometime, if not in January, by February, we'll have another sort of tranche of grant awards that we can make from some of these agencies that have been able to move from deferred status to having a full COA. Moving on to the rail program, so I continue to work in the joint service. I think we have a session, that executive session scheduled next week to provide an update to the board on what's going on with the joint service negotiations, but they continue to go well. I would say if there's any board members who are not able to attend that executive session next week, let me know and I can make arrangements to get you a briefing another way. Another thing that I'm working on is our overall website. It feels like it's really ready for a fresh update. I've been meeting with the C.comms team and have a plan for that. Optimistically, we'll have that in time to show off at the January board meeting. If not by January, definitely by February, we'll have a fresh look. And again, I just feel like the website's great, but I think it needs an update to deal with our expanded functions and our program. So legal considerations. I think most people have probably heard right now, but we are being sued over the SB 230 program. Again, that's kind of gets into the legal world, so I'm not going to say much about it here. We may go into executive session in January so I can give the Attorney General's office a chance to brief the board on what's going on there. And then lastly, CTE is required every year to provide a report to the legislature and to the Transportation Commission. That's been drafted. It's at the governor's office for review now. As soon as I get it back, I'll be sending it out to the board for comment. Hopefully that's sometime next week. It's not too long. It's about 10 or 12 page document. I think you've seen prior years. And we'll just ask that if you can give it a quick review, let me know if you have any comments so I can finalize that and make sure we comply with our statutory requirements. With that, Chairman Jones, back to you.
Thanks so much, Craig, for that report. Are there any questions from directors on the program administrator update? Hearing none, we can move on to director comments. I would like to start off with passing it over to Director Brackey for her remarks.
Great. Thank you, Chair Jones. I appreciate this. And just wanted to take a moment. As we all know, Senator Faith Winter was tragically killed last month. And I just think it's important for us to take a moment at our CTE board meeting to honor her and her legacy, her life, and all of the leadership that she provided and the vision that she created for transit throughout the state of Colorado. Her work alongside many, many people is what helped create CTE. For me personally, I feel like I wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for her. And the fact that we have the Clean Transit Enterprise and the funding that goes into this program to create such amazing progress and make a difference across the state of Colorado is in a huge part because of Faith's work and the inclusivity in how she went about her work to bring in different voices into the process to help create a new future for the state of Colorado and for us to be able to have this opportunity and this responsibility to be sitting here today and to be able to go to work as stewards of the CTE program. So I just wanted to take a moment to honor her and honor her life, and also to ask all of us together as the CTE board and as our agency partners that as we go forward, let's keep Faith in mind, and let's keep her vision and the purpose and the amazing opportunity that CTE is to be able to, again, advance transit and to give more and more people access to transit across the state. And so I just think it's a tremendous gift that she gave us and an opportunity for us to honor her in the work that we do today and for all of the years going forward. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to share the comments with the board today.
Thank you so much, Director Brecky. It was glad. Thank you for taking the time to share those words and remarks and lifting up the work that we're doing and the contributions that Senator Winter made to help us all be here to do this great work. So much appreciated from you. Any other comments from other directors at this time? Hearing none, we will move on to our big topic for today. We have a number of guests here at the meeting, most notably General Manager Deborah Johnson from RTD. Thank you so much for joining us, as well as Ben Celius. And I think maybe a couple other RTD staffers listening in. I'll first pass it over to Craig to introduce the item, and then he will pass it over to our friends at RTD.
Sure. Thank you very much, Director Jones. Go ahead to the next slide. So I think as the whole board is aware, in addition to standing up the 3 new programs under SB 230, as part of the formula program, the legislature has charged the CTE and the CTA board with working with RTD to address a bunch of really reporting requirements that were established under the legislation. And so I've kind of consolidated those. There's really 8 technically, but I think they consolidate into 5, which is to post their overall budget and a 1-pager on their budget on the RTD website, to create and maintain both an annual and a quarterly dashboard about the status of capital projects. And originally it was all capital projects, and last year there was legislation run that was enacted that increased the threshold for that to $10 million. It's to create and maintain an annual dashboard on RTD's website that shows ridership, service, and service reliability by route. There's requirement to create and maintain, again, an annual and quarterly dashboard regarding workforce statistics. And then lastly is create and maintain information on the website about service changes, their causes, and their impacts. And I just want to highlight that, I think these are very important requirements. A lot of money is really resting on that. Ultimately, these determine whether RTD is eligible and receive $40 to $50 million a year. So I encourage the board to take their review of these very seriously. I also think that there's sort of 2 parts to this. There's the actual letter of the law, which kind of relates, I think, just to the data. But then I think there's the intent of the legislation. And that gets more to not just sort of providing this data, but turning it into information that's meaningful to people. And some of the guidance that I provided to RTD staff as they're working on this is to think about who are the potential, likely or potentially audiences for each of these areas. And then what is it they're really looking for to make sure that we're not just doing this to check a box, but to really, serve a need and help advance the knowledge and information of stakeholders for RTD. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Deborah Johnson and staff. Desiree, I think you need to turn off our sharing and allow RTD to do it. And like I said, we've allotted a good amount of time for this. I think we've got about a half hour. And like I said, I think Director Jones, I think if you can, we'll probably get into a Q&A period afterwards. And I think you just kind of run that. So with that, I'm going to turn off my mic and let's let RTD take it over.
If I may. Yes, so good afternoon, all is introduced. I'm Deborah Johnson. I have the pleasure of serving as the General Manager and Chief Executive Officer at the Regional Transportation District. So greetings to you, Chair Jones, members of the CTE Board, as well as to Executive Director Seacrest. Mr. Seacrest outlined why we're here before you today, and I'd be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to further amplify that RTD is committed to transparency and believes in having information readily available for the betterment of the communities, customers, and constituencies that are served. Recognizing public transportation agencies across the country are heavily regulated, I am in alignment with Mr. Seacrest's sentiment that while we provide information, we want to ensure that it's useful to those that are most reliant upon transit services and those that can garner a better understanding of how might they use the service themselves, because we are interwoven in the fabrics of the communities that we serve. I have the pleasure of having Ben Celius, who is on our performance management team. He serves as a senior performance analyst, and he is readily available to walk you through the dashboard, recognizing that there are areas in which Mr. Seacrest talked about. We pride ourselves on thinking about this as an evolutionary process, in the sense that we'll get better and better as we move down this path, and want you all to know that we're highly committed to mobility options here in the state of Colorado, specifically in the metro area, and look to all of you as we continue on this vital partnership. So with that, Mr. Celius, the floor is yours. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Deborah. My name again is Ben Celius. I'm a senior performance analyst here at RTD. And my role the last few months has just been to coordinate the aggregation of this data that's been requested by the bill, and to get that into a format that is both easily understandable and easily updated on the website. So I'll just fairly quickly walk you through the elements and where those are posted on the website. And then if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and we'll do our best to answer those. This is a slide that was not in the original packet, so this is an addition. We didn't originally have a slide that addressed the financial information that Craig had discussed there in item number 1 of his slide, and that is where the budget information lies on the website. So I threw this in just to cover that piece. And this is located on our website. If you navigate to the main site, you go to Open Records, and then it is there under the financial information. And that allows us to show you both the current year budget as well as any proposed budget that may be pending or being discussed within 4 clicks. So that is nice and readily available there on our website. And that covers not only the full budget as requested by the bill, but also the 1-pager as Craig referenced. So those both are there on the website and easy to locate. And we also have a considerable amount of other budget information there for our users to delve into. So I just wanted to call that out in addition to the slides that you have seen. Next is the main area where we have all of the dashboard elements. And what we chose to do was aggregate both the SB 230 as well as the SB 161 elements on the same page. There is some crossover with some of those requested metrics, so it made sense to put both on the same page. But those are easily found on our website. Moving back to the first slide, if you were to click on Open Records and then click on Public Information Dashboards, that will take you to the page that I just pulled up here. And then within this page, we have each of the elements required by the bill attached to each of these little buttons. So you click on the button and it takes you to that specific element. Some of them are simply Power BI dashboards because the metrics lend themselves to that kind of visual. Some of them are a little more complex, such as the capital projects quarterly update requirement. There are actually several elements required in that, and that was just not something that could be easily done in a Power BI visual. So we actually had to create a visual slide with all those elements in there, and I can show you that here in just a moment. This is a table that links to all of those elements. In your slide document, you should be able to click on all these and it'll take you directly to that page. But these are where we posted all of them. And here's just a quick synopsis of the bill language as it pertains to SB 230, as well as how we chose to approach that in terms of our methodology and our calculations. So that is pretty well called out there in that table. And if I may, what I would like to do is just, let's take one example here, the capital projects quarterly update. This is the one I pointed out was not easily put into a Power BI visual. So this is one where there are multiple requirements. We are required to post capital projects that are above $10 million in original budget, or we're required to post the total funding, as well as expended amounts to date. And this is as of Q3. So all of this data stops at September 30th for Q3, whether or not it's on budget, funding source, as well as a timeline and where we're at with that project. So this was the best way that we could think of to aggregate all of those pieces together in something that's relatively easy for our users to navigate and understand. So this is one that was a little bit more challenging than some of the others. We also threw in a couple of links. Some of the projects are pretty big, and for those larger projects, we do try to stand up a page on our website to go further into depth of what's going on with that project. So for example, here our rapid transit on 119, we have a separate page that has a considerable amount of information, updates as to our progress, and other documentation is available there as well. And if I may, I will go back and pull up one that is specifically Power BI based. Here's one for workforce statistics. This is one that is pretty easily put into Power BI visual. So this tracks over time the vacancy rates for our two main modalities, bus and rail, which are quite different in terms of their vacancy rates. So again, this is just a Power BI visual that pulls from data that we're able to get out of various systems. And it is updated again quarterly per the requirements of the bill, or sometimes earlier. This particular visual is tied to some other requirements that we have on the website for our performance dashboard, and therefore this one will actually update nearly monthly. We'll probably post November data here in the next week or so, but most of them will update quarterly. Some will update sooner than that. Okay, do we have any questions that anyone wants to ask?
Thanks, Ben. Is that conclude what you wanted to discuss, or is this just a pause point before getting into anything else?
No, this is all I really had to show you the
Okay.
website. We did try to keep everything, as I said, contained to just those two pages, the budget page and then this consolidated metrics page. So that way we don't have members of the public trying to go all over the website looking for information in different places or digging through documents.
Great. Well, thanks for the presentation. It might be maybe helpful then to stop sharing the screen. I imagine some directors are going to have some questions and comments that they have for you at this time. So folks could use the raise hand function if you have any questions regarding this data report. I see Director Brackey.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate General Manager Johnson and Ben for you being here today to present this information, and Craig for your overview to help us get started. I guess from my perspective, and I appreciate you walking us through this information and the new slide that you included around the financial information. I guess what I'm struggling with, and I'll just be direct, is I feel like while this is meeting perhaps the basic intent or the letter of the legislation, what's missing for me is really how is this going to tie to the broader purpose? How is this information going to be used by RTD? How is this information going to be tracked over time? What is that? How is this not just data, but information that's going to be used to guide decision-making, prioritization? Because at the end of the day, I feel we're responsible as the CTE board as being the stewards of the funding. And I want to be able to go to a source of information and be able to know myself as well as share with others that yes, the CTE funding flowing to RTD is going to the areas that were intended, and that the results are, X, Y, and Z. What are the outcomes that the funding is achieving that are tied to these specific areas of the legislation, but that are tied to basically continuous improvement practices more broadly. Because again, at the end of the day, our shared mission is to grow transit and grow transit access for the public and use these CTE dollars to help RTD be more successful and then help CTE be successful. So our success is tied together, and I'm not seeing that bigger picture in the information that you've shared with us, either in our packet or in the presentation today. And I'll give you another maybe more detailed example. One of my questions is, I see the information you shared with us about the timeline, for example, of the capital projects, but it didn't say what the original delivery date was. So while you could gauge, is a project on budget or not, there was no way to gauge from that information, is the project on time or not? So I think both of those pieces of information are important. But again, more broadly, I feel like the comment that was made at the beginning is helpful, that this is evolutionary information and approach, because I feel like this is a good start, but it's not complete yet from my perspective. I'm curious what other board members think as well. So I'm just looking for something more holistic.
Thank you for those thoughts, comments, questions, Director Brackey. I did see that General Manager Johnson has raised her hand. So do you want to respond to those comments?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Jones, and thank you, Director Brackey, for the question. And perhaps Mr. Seacrest will want to lean into this response, talking about a holistic approach, recognizing the responsibility of CTE relative to the legislation that was effectuated that brings us here today to talk about where we are with the requirements. First and foremost, relative to RTD, as I stated at the outset of this topic, that's of conversation, is that RTD is committed to being transparent. And while there were requirements set forth in the legislation, please know that we're committed to providing information. Relative to enhanced transit utilization, what might those monies be focused on as we look at our overarching budget and recognizing the vast importance of service delivery, be it rubber tire, fixed route, or para. We have that information that we had, I would say, perhaps in a disparate fashion in various communication platforms and conduits as well. Relative to this information that's contained herein, we were adhering to the requirements, but more broadly, as we talk about the strategic plan of the organization and the vision to be the trusted leader in mobility, delivering excellence and value to our customers, we look at those 4 strategic pillars being customer value, community value, customer excellence, employee ownership, and financial success as being the functional pillars upon which we make decisions, coupled with our transit asset management plan that are all focused relative to where we are to ensure that we're good stewards, and then adhering to the requirements as specified under the Federal Transit Administration as a modal administration under the US DOT. And so when you take those into consideration and you look at the designated metropolitan planning organization being DRCOG and how we use long-range planning aspects, all of these aspects feed into what it is that we have to do relative to ridership and providing that to the National Transit Database as a requirement of FTA. So what we can do relative to the comments that you've outlined, recognizing that Mr. Seacrest identified as well, threading the needle relative to what might be helpful, we are most certainly welcome to getting feedback and actually could leverage a conduit whereby we could ask people to needle around there and we can make adjustments so it's user friendly, because this isn't a fait accompli, as I was saying, because we receive this information and some of these elements are already statutorily required by the federal government. And so basically what we're trying to do is ensure that we're being comprehensive and being attentive and responsive, but recognizing it goes beyond this in reference to what it is that we need to do to be good fiduciaries and be interwoven into the fabrics of the communities that we serve. So with that as a backdrop, I welcome the opportunity, and if it is permissible by this board, happy to engage with Mr. Seacrest where we can thread the needle somewhat relative to where we are to ensure that it's more intuitive for somebody. I believe that the average individual may not understand the elements of how one does a service change, how you have to do run cutting. And I'm using terminology that some people may not be familiar with intentionally as it relates to what it is that we do to deliver service, recognizing quite naturally we're going to look at the aspect of revenue service hours, vehicle miles traveled, as we determine how those monies are being utilized for the betterment of being good stewards of those dollars that RTD could reap relative to delivering expand service or increasing frequency by being more intentional by optimizing the various modes and the connectivity therein.
Thank you for that. Do we have other questions from directors? Director Averill.
Chair Jones, and thanks to RTD staff for being here. Kind of just want to build a little bit on what Kathleen was saying. I have a couple comments based on browsing the dashboard there. One thing that I feel like would be helpful in the future, and it's just as data builds up and you assemble it, is to build in some sort of comparisons to how much is this funding making a difference, like what's actually happening before the funding existed and before you had access to it and used it, and what's the outcome of the funding, like some quarterly, like benchmarking against last quarter or this time last year or whatever. And Ben, I feel for you. I run a much smaller transit organization down here in Telluride, but we do have a pretty robust performance reporting policy that we do, and it's data for us, Wrangle, so I understand your position. But to me as a director, when I get asked about the program, and not just RTD, but any project that we're funding, I want to be able to tell a story about the program and the impact of the funding. And when I look at the RTD dashboard, I'm not sure I have much of a story to tell besides what you've given me there. And that's just speaking as a director and a transit provider. I think it's super important when we do these performance measures and reporting that we have a storytelling capacity to them. I mean, that's a really fundamental element. And then other thing I see on the capital project list, $10 million is a small project for RTE. It's a huge project for a lot of us out here. But I'm wondering if there would be a way to, because I guess there's a gap there. How many small projects do you add that do you guys have? They're less than $10 million. I don't necessarily, I'm not interested in the number of projects, but in your mind, of those small projects, we'll just call that, how many millions of dollars are tied up in those small projects as a bucket, right? Like, you've got signal system changes or a minor, smaller bus procurement or vehicle procurement. Are we talking another $100 million in capital projects, or is it like 80? I'm just curious if there's a way to maybe get a little bit more light on the smaller stuff just as a bucket rather than just several, big ticket items that big corridor projects or something like that. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Averill. Seeing General Manager Johnson's hand up to respond to that.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, Director Averill, for your comments. One thing that I failed to say that we as a team are collectively working on a performance report. Should have that readily available in the next few months. That's critically important as we look at our overarching performance, and more to the point, as we talk about whether projects that we have within our transit asset management plan. We have projects that are in the budget, so we could do something relative to creating that nexus, Director Averill, so it would be readily apparent. But I wanted to share as we go through this iteration and providing that report that will now enable you all to see the amalgamation of the information and what that story actually is being told. And I will stand in my truth and say, while we have a lot of information, at one point we look at it through the lens that we're data rich and information poor. So as we go through this as a team and looking at it through a strategic prioritization aspect, we will have that readily available. So as I said before, thank you so much for your comments.
Thank you. Next, we have Director Frommer.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and welcome, Director Johnson. Nice to see you. I was going to say something very similar to Director Averill. I totally agree. When I'm looking at the dashboard, I guess I'm trying to figure out what the takeaways are and what the story is. And it feels like some of the data is a little bit floating in space. Is RT doing better in this area than past years? Is it doing worse? It'd be nice to see some of this like grounded in RTD's performance measures. So if you all have like goals around reliability, like how does it stack up against that? And you may have that in other materials and it's not seen it on the dashboard. But just as far as like the use of this, and I appreciate you said like that transit riders should be able to see this stuff. I'm also thinking about just like RTD's reputation in the public and reporters who come to look at the dashboard and are looking for stories. And I think about this isn't a 230 requirement, but 161 we've got a safety dashboard there, and safety is one where like there's a perception that RTD's unsafe, primarily among people who don't use it. Right, people who use RTD think it's safer than people who don't use RTD, and so I feel like that's like a PR problem that we need to be able to tell, like use the data to tell the story that RTD's made some progress in these areas, assuming it has. And I think the dashboard could be really helpful there. That's just one example. But similarly on, reliability, on ridership and those sorts of things. So really looking for those takeaways from the dashboard, relative to past years' performance measures and how it translates into those stories.
Thank you, Director Frommer. General Manager Johnson, do you want to respond to that?
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to acknowledge Director Frommer's comments and say I hear you and I acknowledge that. And that gives us an opportunity quite naturally with anything recognizing a transit agency, and Director Averill can speak to this relative to looking at, on-time performance, boardings, off the lot, all these different aspects to give us a notion of how we're performing. Of course, we have that information. And I believe this conversation has been fruitful looking at it through your lens in relationship to how we might be doing things, because more to the point, we do have a security related page. RTD has been at the forefront in reference to the perceptions and opinions relative to, I would qualify it as personal security and safety, because that's what we're talking about, not mechanical safety. So this gives us an opportunity to shore this up, and working with Mr. Seacrest, happy to engage and come back and make some tweaks and, perhaps provide links where we could garner additional feedback and address your comments. So thank you again for indulging me with that response.
Thank you. Anyone else before I maybe say a few words and ask some questions? All right. So I'll probably just reiterate what we've heard from other directors, and thank you, Deborah, for your responses, and looking forward to continuous improvement in this space. As I've visited the data dashboards frequently over the past number of months, and every time I go there is more information. And it's clear that you all have been listening and that you're working to be responsive. And I just want to speak to what our goals are as stewards of a significant amount of resources, maybe not significant in the grand scheme of the RTD budget, but we have a charge and a responsibility to make change for our communities and for the state. And we want to be able to rely on you all as significant recipients of a huge portion of those resources to help share our story of our successes and how we're being good stewards of these dollars. And you've heard comments to that end. And so I'm looking forward to that continuous improvement. I hearken back to my early days in my career where every month an RTD statistician would send out a massive spreadsheet that had the ridership of every route in the system since 1981. And we had to do all of our self-processing. It was just one big spreadsheet and everybody got it and you got to do with it what you want. And it had everything from, boardings per hour, service hours, all the stats that you could ever want around a route. And, turnover happened, institutional knowledge lost. I doubt that spreadsheet still exists. Technologies change, right? So now we're in this space where we're not sending out big, massive Excel spreadsheets anymore. And we're trying to translate data, as you mentioned, data rich, information poor, as we try to make stuff more user friendly. And then there's accessibility requirements on websites and all the things that we all have to respond to is how do we translate all these requirements from different agencies and levels of government into something that's actually usable and helpful in that narrative. And so I'm hopeful that over time we'll continue to see improvement in this area. I would love to be able to not just see a snapshot in time of ridership, but a story over time, over many years, and be able to manipulate that dashboard in a way I don't have to do all that work that I used to do, 20 years ago in building that all myself in an Excel spreadsheet for my own individual agency purposes. It'd be great if we were able to use technology of today to make that easy for anybody to do. And so really looking forward again to that continuous improvement so that we can tell that story. How are our resources affecting the positive change that we all want to see? And how do we get to a place where the state legislature isn't legislating this level of micromanagement of your organization into thinking, we have folks who aren't in the transit world deciding for us all what data metrics are important. And you all have been responsive to that and reactive. And I appreciate that. How do we leverage our resources to get you all to a space where your folks aren't compelled to chime in from a legislative level on what data they need you to be reporting because you're doing such a fantastic job on that front that that's not a conversation that needs to be had. And we want to be helpful to you all in that space. And we have a small bucket of money, relatively speaking, to help influence that. And so that's what you're experiencing with Craig coming and having conversations with you all because he's hearing that from us. And so again, looking forward to this continuing to improve and hopefully someday it's not tied to legislation. It's just, it's part of how you all are doing business in a way that everybody is able to appreciate and actually duplicate, right? If these other agencies are seeing RTD setting this example for how a transit agency is communicating information, that they get to then just imitate and duplicate, and that would be a great place to get to. Not tomorrow perhaps, but something over time. So that's just what I wanted to share. Not necessarily a question in there other than, I guess the question is are there some things, again, because I've seen this dashboard changing in real time. Every time I go there, there's more information. It's not super user friendly, but it's more than we had before. Are there some improvements that you're already thinking that you're planning to make that we should be anticipating in the months ahead?
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Yes, quite naturally. Yes, that's our intent as we go forward. As you heard from Mr. Cilius, we're talking about using Power BI. You saw the financial page go up due to the fact that the board just approved the budget on December 2nd. So we had to ensure that that was there. So we're working collectively through the lens of our strategic planning and having our scorecards and have them aligned as we go forward and optimizing various resources from the vantage point of identifying, procurement strategies. So we have a dashboard that's inclusive. And so in the spirit of the legislation, quite naturally, we were doing some things in-house to meet the letter of the law in that regard, but that does not mean we're going to stop there. So just wanted to share that. And Mr. Seeless, I see you're off, your mic isn't muted. Did you want to add anything in case I said something that wasn't reflective of what you're actually doing? I want to ensure that you keep me on my toes.
I just wanted to add one more thing, and that is this group is really the first group we've been able to take this to and bounce ideas off of. So you're the first step in the feedback process. So not only do I appreciate that, bear in mind we're just now starting to gain feedback, and we'll be able to put that into the system. So that's what's on the horizon, is getting more feedback and using that.
Great. Thank you so much. If there are no other questions, Craig, I see your hand.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm probably a little late on this, but I want to just set some expectations about where the route or how this goes. And RTD provided the links and the presentation last week. I provided the link to the board, I think this past weekend, and this is really the first time the board has gotten a chance to look at that. So, I imagine all the board members would like some more time to actually dig through and play with the websites and see where it goes. And I think based on that, I'll work to collect comments if this works for you, Chairman Jones. I'll collect those comments and ideas from the board, try and kind of rationalize them and provide RTD some feedback. But, my sense is this is probably a little bit of an iterative process, but we can get to some point where I think we're sort of formally adopting or approving what RTD has provided. And I see Director Liu, I know she was having some technical issues, is now available.
Yes, Director Liu. You were unmuted, but there you are.
I continue to have some technical issues. I just wanted to kind of support what Craig just said about process. I think having some more time to iterate on it, process, and for answering some of the questions that have been raised that I think are important to work through before we kind of get this into the shape where it will be kind of updated in perpetuity. So would appreciate following that process that Director Seacrest has identified.
Thank you, Director Liu. You were cutting out a little bit, but I think we got the gist that you're in support of what Director Seacrest just shared as how we'll provide feedback for continuous improvement.
Yes. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Well, I just want to say thank you again to General Manager Johnson and Ben Seeless. Thanks for taking the time to be with us. I know this has been a highly anticipated conversation, so hopefully you're feeling good about where we're at in this environment. And we will again look forward to providing additional feedback and seeing this just get better and better over time. So yes, thank you so much for joining us today. And with that, we can move on to our next item, the CTE Capital NOFA overview.
Hello, everyone. Yes, sorry about that. Just coming off mute here. Wanted to give the board a quick update on the results of the CTE Capital NOFA. This call for projects closed this past Friday, December 5th. We've conducted our initial review of the submissions. It appears that we've received a total of 14 applications seeking more than $37 million worth of grant funding. Those include 9 in the vehicles category for a total of 26 vehicles across those 9 applications, 3 in the infrastructure, charging and fueling infrastructure category, and 2 in the facility modification category. So that is a pretty strong response given all of the uncertainty out there right now in the market. A lot of familiar applicants that we have seen in previous rounds, as well as a few new ones, including RTD, I will note. So we are excited to start reviewing those with the scoring committee. Our intention is that we would have that process wrapped up to bring recommendations to you all in March at your board meeting. And pending the discussion there, we would be making another round of capital awards out to the agency. So I'm happy to answer any questions at this point. Of course, we haven't dug fully into the specifics of any applications, and I would not want to speak too specifically about any of them at this point. But if I can answer any questions right now, I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you so much, Michael. Any questions? I see Craig has raised his hand.
Yeah, thank you. Just two things. One, I would like to say I was very happy to see that for the first time we received a application from RTD for I think it's a facilities project. I won't go into the details about it, but again, I think we were very happy to see RTD coming in and requesting funding for something under the retail delivery program. Second, I just want to go back to our budget where we had said, we roughly think there's $20 million available. And we weren't really sure what level of interest there was, but we can take a look at our budget. But I know we do have, potentially some room for something beyond the $20 million line that we had talked about, if we feel like, the programs are really, have merit and are worth it. So kind of good news is that that $20 million was, we set a line, something we put out there, but we do have the ability to do a little bit more if we think that the projects really merit it. So I really appreciate the work that Mike and folks have done to go out and get this level of demand and interest in programs under the CTE. I think he's to be commended for, getting that level of demand is something really exceptional. So I think we're making great progress. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Director Frommer.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to ask, I don't know if Mike, you're the best person to answer this, but if we could just get your take on the state of the electric transit bus manufacturing market right now. I know it's kind of been a rough ride. Companies like Proterra going out of business. Are we seeing the tide turn? Is that giving transit agencies confidence that they can purchase zero emission buses?
That is quite a large topic, and I don't know that I'm in a position today to really speak in an informed manner on that. What I can tell you is that Craig and myself and some of our colleagues at CDOT are making a lot of effort right now to have those conversations with various folks across the industry. We are attempting to figure out what is the best solution for those agencies that have Proterra vehicles and are trying to move forward in light of the bankruptcy. We're trying to understand who are the new manufacturers that are starting to enter the market in the US. There are a couple of those from Europe that we're starting to see set up operations in the US and might become players in the near future. And then we're also talking about and investigating some of the some agencies in the country are starting to look at Buy America compliant vehicles as sort of an alternative pathway that they could procure vehicles that would not be eligible for federal funding, but maybe would be eligible for state funding like the CTE. So we're trying to understand what that looks like and what are the costs and benefits there. So I would be very happy to potentially share some findings with the CTE board at a future meeting. As of today, it's a little bit hard for me to say, do the agencies that are pursuing these grant funds right now, do they have confidence in the current market? Is there growing or shrinking confidence, or is it just that these are the agencies that are more prepared to pursue funding at the moment, but that doesn't necessarily speak to their overall perception of the ZEV market and the future of that market.
Thanks, Mike. Do we have any other hands, any other questions on this item? All right. Hearing none, now we're a bit ahead of schedule. Our next item is back to Craig on SB 230 NOVA application reviews.
Oh, actually, Craig, I think we might have skipped. We did have one more slide. We wanted to share. That's my bad for forgetting that. We have some good news that we also wanted to share with the board about a previous capital grant. The CTE has actually reimbursed its first completed project for a zero emission vehicle purchase. This was in October. It was a grant to Laraton Hall, which is a Denver-based organization. They were awarded 2 battery electric vans in their fleet, and then those were delivered a few months back, and the CTE has now reimbursed them for that grant amount. Laraton Hall is an interesting organization if you're not familiar with them. They have actually been doing a lot of work to transition their fleet. This brings the total of number of vehicles in their fleet to 7. And these are not 40-foot buses. These are vans and cutaway vehicles, which are an emerging area of zero emission vehicles for the transit world. Laraton provides services that allow individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities to access their multiple campuses in the Denver Metro, as well as community programs. So the service type that they provide is also a little bit different from the fixed route that we're more familiar with some of our other leading ZEV agencies in the state. So this is a highlight for us to see this first project come to completion. We're excited for more projects like this across the state, and we'll continue reporting to the board as more of them complete, because it's been a long road to get here, and we're starting to see the results of that out on the road in Colorado. So thank you for letting me circle back to that, and happy to answer any questions about this, or if in the future we want more information about Laraton or other grantees, we'd be happy to prepare that for a future board meeting.
Thank you for that. It's helpful. It's the first of many. That certainly could be an interesting space in the website for folks to start seeing the actual physical manifestation of how these resources are being spent over time. Craig.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment that as we get further down the road and we start getting more agencies that are buying their vehicles or getting infrastructure in place, or really making progress on the planning studies we're funding, I plan to have those agencies come in and present. And I was really trying to see if we could find someone to come in and talk about their planning efforts, but we're not there yet. But I did want to let the board know that I, very much plan to have people come in, and one, so you don't have to listen to me talk all the time, but also I think we're all very interested in hearing about the actual experiences that are going on with our program. So that's in the works.
Great. There aren't any other questions, comments on this topic. We can move on to the application reviews.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Jones. So we've got 2 awards that I want to get to recommending, but before that, we've had the board has requested to see a bit more information about what have we done to date, and like what agencies are in and what's their status. So I want to just give a little bit on this. So the first slide here, these are all the agencies where we have made SB 230 formula awards so far. So beginning with the very first one in August to Gunnison Valley RTA. We're currently at, I think this is 16, if I counted right. But we're a total of $15.1.2 million. As you recall, last month, I presented and the board approved an idea where for agencies that are looking to try and use their SB 230 to add to their fleet or buy buses, we decided to allow those agencies to kind of borrow from next year's allocation so that they could go ahead and get those buses delivered sooner, get the transit services out there and increasing ridership and reducing greenhouse gases sooner, and also hopefully save some money, as I think agencies are looking at 8 to 10% inflation on bus purchases. So that second column there about the FY27 advance, that's what that is. And then it was just showing the total. So all told, that a total is just about $18.7 million. That's been awarded, and I'm frantically working with DTR staff to try and get this stuff into the grant bill process and get them cranked out. And I know there's a lot of anxious agencies waiting for that, and I'm doing my best. But we got a ways to go there, but we'll get there. Let me go on to the next slide. Oh, actually, let me pause there. Any questions from board about those current awards?
Yes, this is Director Brackey. Sorry, I'm having trouble trying to get the hand raise function to work. You'd think after all these years. There, I did it.
All right, now you're official.
Sorry to just to jump in. Chris, is it okay if I just go ahead with my question? Okay. So anyway, I want to say thank you so much for preparing these slides, because this is something that's, we have talked about for a bit, and it's really helpful information for me. I hope it's helpful for others, but really to get to see that big picture. I am curious if there's a way, I realize on this first slide, it's showing, the time they've come in, and the approval, and then the funding amounts. What would the subsequent steps be for each of these entities as they go forward? Is there like a contracting time frame, and then like the actual initiation of the service, or trying to think about, just as we were talking about on the prior item related to RTD reporting, is there a way to kind of use this as a jumping off point to say how could we track progress on these over time?
Director Jones. Okay, okay, if I go ahead and respond.
Yes, please.
So great question. First of all, I would say, this is kind of a cheap and dirty approach that I threw together for this presentation. I'm working on something that's much more, I think, both robust and a little bit more impressive looking. That's going to be on our website, that I plan to just try and get up there and keep, almost to the day, up to date, up to the day, so that you can see better information about it. So yeah, there's more coming from this. This is a cheap and dirty effort, but we'll get to something that's much better and on the CT website. To your other question about, the steps, there are several steps that we go through as part of going from, the award that the board makes to, an executed grant contract. And I don't know, I want to say that's a 12-step program, but I don't know if that's right, but maybe it ought to be. But there are a bunch of immediate steps that go to getting it into COTRAMS and making an award letter at the front end, to getting it into CDOT's kind of financial systems where it's in the STIP, and then moving on to contracting and getting through the contracting process. And I'm working, I think like the nuts and bolts of some of those very specific things are maybe in the weeds, where maybe we can kind of consolidate into like 3 or 4 major steps where we can show where that is. And again, I would like to get to more of an actual target, where I'm setting target dates to get these things completed. And if we're not there, let's show it and take our lumps. But I think part of of being transparent is showing what your target dates are, and are you making it or not? And quite frankly, we may not make some of them. And that may drive our need for improvement. But I feel like it's important just to get all that out there. So I am going to work on it. My sense is it's a 4 to 6 month process from award to get to a full executed contract, and that's if everything goes well. So I just said, if you can give me another month or so, I'm working on trying to get this elevated to that level where you can really understand where these contracts are, and not just the board, but I think the individual agencies really have the right to know. So that's all coming, if you can bear with me a little bit.
Another area where, we considered in the CTE about how the rest of the CDOT organization, that was just a little joke.
Fair enough. Okay, if there's no more questions, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is the agencies that are not awarded yet, and the 2 agencies that we're going to award today are not in either of these lists. But basically, we've got about 5 agencies that that have submitted full COAs that we're still working with, and that's either because the agency still has some internal things going on. One other thing that's happened since our last board meeting, I think, is that FTA made the 5339 awards. So there's a few agencies that are coming back to me and saying, hey, that changes things a little bit. So anyway, we've got a few agencies that are close, but in a little bit of a limbo stage. Either I'm working with them or consultants working with them. And, hopefully, most, if not all of those, can come to the board in January for approval. I know several of those are close. That's the 5 that are there, 5, 6, 5. And then there's all the deferred COAs, and I forgot to count them. I don't know, it's 15 or 20. But these are agencies that, some are pretty close. Again, I know I've been talking to our consultant, and they said, yeah, I think by January or February, we should be able to get, these people into full COAs and bring them to board approval. Others are a bit further out. Some of them have internal budget issues and things like that going on, but we're actively trying to work with all of them. I was had emails today back and forth with Transport that they're really trying to get from their deferred status, and I'm hoping to go up there next week to meet with them. So this is very much an ongoing process, and I think is kind of what we envisioned when we came up with the deferred COA approach, that you've got a whole range of agencies that are in different places of the process, and we tried to create something as flexible as possible so that we can give them a good chance of getting the money, give them some time, but also have a structure to get there. I do think at some point we're going to need to sort of set a deadline and say, if you don't have your full COA approved, by this date, then I think the money's we're going to stop reserving the money and put it back in the pool for FY27. I think that might need to be in kind of the April timeframe. I'd like to give that a little more thought and perhaps bring it back to the board in January for more formal direction. Anyhow, let me stop there. Any questions about the agencies that are in the, either the full COA or pending full COA approach?
Director Farmer.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. I just had a question about one of these in particular, but it might be more. But in deferred COA, you have Boulder County listed. As far as I know, they don't run their own transit right now. Can you just describe their proposal or their plan, and maybe others like it?
Sure. Well, kind of the part of having a deferred COA is they don't have a plan. And so I mean to be crass, but it's kind of like their plan is to make a plan. But you're right. They don't actually operate their own facilities. I believe all of their transit operations are outsourced to Via Transit. But still, Boulder County is the one planning those services. They're just, rather than providing them in-house, or decide to sort of outsource the actual provisioning of those services. As to exactly what they're planning to do, I haven't really gotten that kind of feedback or heard much from them yet. But I think they're working through some budget issues to figure out how it comes together, and then they'll move forward with some planning.
Thanks. Director Brackey.
Great, thank you. And again, I appreciate this information. And I really like what you were talking about, Craig, about kind of coming up with a time frame that says, we're giving you this extra time to get your ducks in a row, but we really need your ducks together and a COA by some sort of endpoint so that it doesn't just keep going on in perpetuity, so that we do have a handle on what the holistic program looks like and who's all included in that. I guess a question I have is, are there other agencies, I can think of one that it's not on this list at all yet. They're still in the sorting it out stage. And I'm curious, from your vantage point across the state, is that 1 or 2 agencies, or is that more like 10 or 15 agencies? How many more could potentially be working their way up into the process?
Good question. It's a little bit of an unknown. When I originally, put together, we were originally working on the formula. We had to make some estimate or guess on what's the potential universe of agencies that might propose. And I think I'd come up with about 55 agencies. And that was based on agencies that get money for 5311, some of the other grant programs that we have, and our just knowledge of transit in the state. And I think there's maybe 10 or 15, I think we're at about 15 agencies that I thought could potentially come in that didn't. A few of them, I think are in that category where, there's a requirement that this money be used to expand service. They just don't really have the need or desire to expand service. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it means they're probably not a good fit for SB 230. You know, like a Blackhawk might be an example of that, where it's, you know, they just don't have the need. I think there are other agencies where they're, again, kind of working to get their ducks in a row to be ready for that. And I know there's a few agencies that are in that category. In between that is a few agencies that I just don't know. I did a lot of outreach prior to the NOFA coming out. After the NOFA out, you know, I was walking the halls at CASTA conference, trying to make sure that people really understood what the deferred program opportunity was and trying to get them to do it. But there's some agencies that, you know, for whatever reason haven't decided not to come in. And that's a bit of a question mark to me. I just simply not sure what they're going to do. I'll continue to do outreach as part of, as we move into the next year program. I think the more agencies that we have involved in this, the better. It's meant to be a statewide program. And particularly, I think some of those agencies that didn't come in that possibly could tend to be more of those smaller rural agencies. And I think they just might need a little help to get there. So I think CTE's role over the next half year is really to work with those agencies and make sure that they're not missing this opportunity because they either don't know about it or are intimidated by it or don't feel like they've got the resources. You know, with our consultants and our staff, we got the resources to help them get there, and I need to make sure we'll make sure they know that. But you know, it's the old "you can lead a horse to water," but at some point, you know, the decision is theirs to participate or not.
Great, thank you.
All right, are we ready to review applications?
Sure, and I think our timing's in pretty good shape here because we just have two. If we go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so in the past, I feel like we've been a little rushed when we get to this point, and I've kind of run through the agencies really quickly, and we've just kind of approved them as a consent agenda. One, we got a little more time, but also I think given the size of these grant awards, I would prefer that we address them individually. And so the second award is for RTD, by far the largest award we're made. And I've actually, because of that, and you know, just the size and magnitude of it, I've asked the RTD staff to be available in case the board has any questions for them. But if I could proceed with first the core recommendation, and then again, if I'll ask the board to consider motions to approve, and then we'll move on to the second one. So the first award recommendation is for Core Transit. I don't know if you're familiar with Core. Core is in sort of the Eagle Valley out there around Vail. It used to be ECHO or Eagle County Transit. I'm hoping I got that right. And they moved into an RTA. It's now called Core. I was very impressed by their submission. This is one where they submitted it and it needs some work, and we worked with them. Our consultants did a great job trying to help them just tighten up their proposal, provide better explanations of what they're doing. But I think a good example of that process working, having them submit their or provide their response, work with a consultant, and get to something that I think now is really very strong. Their plans like build from a 10-year, I think it's their first 10-year transit plan that they've put together, but I thought it showed very solid planning behind it. All the funding is intended for operations, so they're not looking to buy any vehicles or do any capital applications of their SB 230 grant. And then the specific things that they're planning to do, first of all, is they're kind of making some changes and expanding what they call their Highway 6 route. And as part of doing that, I think they're trying to increase their frequency and reduce headways by about half, and going from like 30 to 40 minutes down to 15 or 20 minutes. And as we know, getting to those greater frequency is really critical to making transit much more appealing and friendly. I think it has a kind of a multiplier benefit. Secondly, is they plan to extend their valley route so that it goes deep. They said deeper into Eagle, but essentially doing route expansion to provide, extend the services available. Their anticipated impacts, and I always kind of realize that we're kind of pushing the agencies a little bit to say what they think the ridership impacts are going to be. But generally, I think it's going to add about 100,000 additional passenger trips I don't know why I have RTDs in there. That might be a typo. I apologize. One thing that I did was I went back and I've been trying to come up with some metrics to help the board better understand these benefits. So I looked at, what is, if they have $100,000 trips and they're getting $1 million, what essentially is that cost per trip? And, I think as we kind of evolve and grow, we'll get better aware of those numbers and be able to say boy, that's a great return, or so. Anyhow, their return is about $9 a trip. So I realize we don't quite have context for that. My sense comparing that to other agencies is that's kind of right in the wheelhouse. That's a pretty decent value. And then additionally, they plan to add about 5.6 thousand vehicle revenue hours and almost 105,000 revenue service hours, and then about 105 vehicle revenue miles. Anyhow, myself and the other CDOT staff reviewed this. We all thought it was now a very strong proposal, and I'd like to recommend, have to take any questions about it. And if not, just ask the board for consideration of approval.
Thanks, Craig. Are there any questions from directors' comments on this application and recommended award? Director Averill.
No questions. I'll just say that I'm a big fan of Core Transit. Up until about a month ago, they were the newest RTA in the state, but then Yampa had to go steal their thunder and pass an RTA, which is super exciting also. So I'll just say I wholeheartedly support this proposal and this award.
Director Averill, I was a little worried where that was going. You were like, I was a big fan to them up to a month ago. I was like, oh no.
I'm still a fan. No, I just say they were the newest, and they stole my thunder. For years I could say Smart was the newest transit agency in the state, and then ECO comes around and does that, but now Yampa yanked the crown from them. So it just happens, which is a good thing. That just means there's more RTAs coming up.
Great.
I saw Director Frommer's hand.
Sorry, I was just clapping for Core Transit.
Got it.
No question there. Yeah.
All right. Do I hear a motion possibly to support this recommended award?
I'd make a motion to support this award, to make this award to Core Transit.
I'll second that.
All right. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you all. So now let's move on to the last one here. And this is, I think, one we've all been waiting for is RTD. I can go on to the next slide, please. So, the grant amount is $9.25 million. And as you all recall, we were in that fog of war of setting up the program in the spring and trying to figure out all these complex nuts and bolts. We worked with RTD and we agreed on, this funding level. And that was part of the CTE board setting the formula for FY26. And, the expectation is that when we get through the reporting requirements, we get into FY27, that this number is going to go up considerably. But this is a good first start year. I was very impressed by the RTD proposal. I mean, obviously RTD has a level of planning that dwarfs all the other agencies, but this is part of their current system and optimization plan. That plan lays out a lot of routes where they're looking to either extend the routes, try to get to higher frequencies, provide better connections, or even reinstate routes that may have gone away during COVID. And this funding, this first shot at funding under SB 230, I think provides a good cross-section of those activities. So, I provided their NOFA response to the board, so you can look at the specific routes, but generally it includes a combination of some frequency enhancements, bringing some of their routes, I believe, from an hourly down to half hour. There might be some other additional frequency improvements. There's some route extensions that they've put in there that are high priority in their system optimization plan to kind of establish these better connections or new connections among the routes. And then there's two routes that were suspended, I believe, during COVID. And they're going to use their SB 230 this year to increase those. As part of the NOFA response, we asked agencies to show what they're going to do going forward. And, that will be determined next year formally, but it's nice to see that RTD plans to use a lot of their SB 230 formula funding in the future to kind of make many of the other improvements that have been made priorities in their SOP. And as they sort of say, 28 and beyond, what they're going to do, I think, is a little bit to be determined. And I think that's reasonable given where we are right now. But I did feel like the plan did a good job, and not just saying what they're going to do now, but how they plan to evolve as the level of funding available goes up. In terms of their projected improvements, they're anticipating that just the FY26 money or improvements made with the FY26 funding would enable 600,000 additional passenger trips. That equates to about $15 a trip. Again, I think, we looked at the other core where they're looking at $9 a trip. I think you're going to be, understand that we're comparing two very different services when you're looking at RTD versus more of a rural RTA area. But within I think a reasonable realm. And then, in terms of other benefits, they plan to add about 50,000 vehicle revenue hours, and that'll equate to almost 600,000 vehicle revenue miles. So I guess, I personally think this is very much ready for a recommendation for award. But I thought the board may have some questions, and I believe we do have people from RTD that are available if the board has any questions. So, Chairman Jones, let me turn it back to you to see if the board wants to discuss it.
Thanks, Craig, and thanks RTD staff for being on the call. Do we have any questions from directors on the RTD recommended award? Director Brackey.
Great, thank you. And I appreciate you sharing this information with us this way, Craig, and being able to talk about each of these separately. I guess my question is, all we're considering for approval today is the 9.25 million, right? This doesn't open the gate for the future 40+ million that would happen at a subsequent action. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. And then I did appreciate the specificity that was in the COA and you sharing that with us for these. I hope that's something we can do for the other ones going forward as well. I guess where I'm coming from on this is I still have my concerns about the conversation we had earlier today and the reporting and the accountability side, but I feel like we did discuss this approach earlier this year with going with this approach with RTD and having this incremental, amount of funding go forward. So I can support that today, but I do think it's very important that we have subsequent conversations as a board before we have any further decision points about the larger sums of money for RTD. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm okay with this incremental approach, but I still feel like I'd like to see more on the accountability side before we make the other larger decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Brackey. Director Frommer.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I've been just nerding out on RTD data recently, especially since they published the ridership by route in one of the board packets. It seems like for the most of these proposed service increases, RTD took the highest performing 30-minute frequency route, in terms of ridership, and then is upgraded to 15 minutes, like the Evans. So kind of playing to the strengths there, which makes total sense to me. Evans, same thing with the 169. It's currently getting 60 minutes. This would bump it to 30. It has relatively high ridership even at 60-minute service. So that makes total sense. Connecting, service increase to ridership, which is the goal of Senate Bill 230 funding. I did want to ask about the two routes that were discontinued during COVID and are now being brought back. I think there's an Aurora, Westminster route, maybe on Sheridan and one other. And why those were included over others that exist now and may have really poor service, infrequent, low service span, that sort of thing. So maybe a really complicated question for right now. Maybe could follow up after, but I did want to ask.
Thanks for the question. Do we have someone from RTD that might be able to respond to that?
Yes, Director. I can answer that question. Kieran Maletsky, I'm a project manager in the planning group and worked on the application. And then I also wanted to acknowledge Jesse Carter, our service planning manager, is on the call as well and would be better able to respond to specific processes related to our service planning. But I know he was having some audio connections as well. So I'll start, and then hopefully he can maybe build on that too. And what I will say is that we've identified a set of routes that's, as you mentioned, from the identified system optimization plan. And Jesse can speak a little more specifically to how those improvements are prioritized, but I would say it's a combination of what you described, Matt, where we do want to make sure we're not just, adding frequency to the highest performing routes, that we're also, maximizing coverage and striking that balance. There's a lot of sorry, I'm looking at the chat here. Is that possible to add his cell phone to the speaker notes to the speakers? While he works on that, though, that we did try to identify a mix of those things that are sort of next in line for our improvements. And this represents about a 1% increase in our bus service, this 26 allocation. And so we identified some needs for that FY27 money that I know we're going to talk about at a future time. But there are truly tons and tons of operational needs that we would benefit from having this funding for. And so we went through a process that Jesse's team went through to kind of pick the top priorities to achieve our system optimization plan, but it is hopefully represents a mix of those kinds of service improvements. Jesse, are you able to add anything to that? Are you able to speak or not yet? And if not, maybe we can come back, or we can also follow up later if there's some more specific questions, Matt, that you may have, or others on the nature of the improvements. I'm certainly happy to have more conversation about specific routes.
Thanks, Kieran. Craig.
Sure. I think in the interest of time, I think we want to kind of wrap that up. But I should say, I think it's important to identify here. I don't think it's the CT's role to get into like the specific plans for every agency and say, no, you should be picking this route over that. I feel like our job is to give it, a sort of review to say, are these eligible and are these reasonable activities? And if so, we're going to give you we'll provide the funding, and now hopefully you'll have the results you do. And if you don't, then I think we're going to have to talk about it. But I do feel like we need to stay in our lane because we just don't have the capacity, nor is it probably appropriate for us to get it in there and saying, no, you should have done this rather than that. So I just wanted to get that out there, I think that's kind of the philosophy, that we're bringing to that. So that's all I have to say.
All right. Are there any other questions from directors on this application before we possibly consider a motion? Seeing no hands, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to support the $9.25 million grant for RTD.
This is Director Brackey. I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Awesome. Okay, I think we got 1 minute to wrap up here, right?
Yep.
All right, I'll channel my Philly roots and talk really fast. No, just thought a great meeting. Thank you all for, first of all, thank you to RTD for coming in and being available to present on the various things. And as always, for the board for your diligent attention to everything. Just we have our next board meeting as we got about 5 or 6 weeks, but it's tentatively scheduled for January 27th. I need to get our whole list of meetings up for 2026. I promise I will do that after I recover from this week. At our next meeting, we hope to have a bunch of more formula grants. I showed you those ones that have some active COAs that we're working with. Hopefully we can award some of those. I don't think we're going to be quite ready to make recommendations on the Transit Zev Capital NOFA results, but I think we can provide a lot more information to you. Lots of fun. We've got a bunch of budget revisions we're going to need to do. Because I'm happy to say that the oil and gas fee is implemented, revenue is coming in, and now that we actually have money in those accounts, we're going to need to move some money around. So just set the expectation, I'll have some budget revisions to our FY26 budgets because now we got cash. And like as I mentioned earlier, I do think we might need to do an executive session to have the Attorney General come in and talk about a few things that are going on. And then lastly, I met with Director Jones a week or two ago about this, but I think given where we are with setting up SB 230, and I've been here a year now, that it's time for us maybe to step back and do some strategic planning. So I'm working to try and find a time where we can hopefully do this in person, but do a strategic planning session where we think a little bit more about where we're trying to go with the overall program and what we're going to try and accomplish in calendar year 2026. So with that, unless there's any other questions, that's a wrap from my end. And I just want to wish everyone a great holidays and look forward to seeing you on the flip side.
Thanks so much. If there are no hands on next steps, any questions? Going once, going twice, I will adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everybody.
See you, everybody.
Thank you all. Happy holidays.
Thanks all.